languages, that would be kind of fine for me. So do let me know, whether you would prefer it to be in Hindi, English, or bilingual. Uh, and then I'll keep that accordingly, right? So at any point of time, something you would want me to translate or explain on, please do feel free to, just raise your hand at that time itself, right? So that it could be a bit interactive also. Right. Um, so let me first begin by, asking you all, what are your ideas around what is academic writing? If I were to ask you, um, we all write, right? We write on messages, we write letters, um, we write to communicate, we write Facebook posts nowadays and on Twitter. And of course, there are journalistic writings, there are blog writings. So if I were to ask you all what makes a writing academic, right? What would your response be? Any ideas? I mean, what do you think it might be? What would make a writing academic? You could also feel free to, just write in the chat box if need be, what as to what you think it would be. Any response? I mean, has any one of you ever received a comment from a teacher that says that, ये बहुत academic नहीं है, is something that somebody else will study? Okay, so I've got one response. Let me just share my screen.
I request all of you to please mute yourself.
I hope this whiteboard is visible to all.
Yes, yes.
Okay, right. So one response that I received was something, it's a writing that someone would study, right? Now, what do we mean by a writing that someone would study? I mean, and I'm interested by the use of this word, writing that somebody would study, instead of the choice of word writing something that somebody will read, right? So again, that also brings me to, what might be a difference between read versus study. If academic writing is something that somebody else will study, there's another response that also says it could be a research paper, literary work, or anything that could be studied by others. How do you distinguish between read versus study? Right. So, I mean, if I write, if any of you are on social media, on Facebook, or you have blogs, or you're on Twitter, you write things, and I hope you write in the expectation that somebody is going to read it, right? So when we say the difference between study and read, what do you think might be the difference between study and read? Is only research work academic? If I were to write an editorial in the newspaper, or if I were to write something, say, for a magazine or a textbook, which is not a research paper, will it be non-academic? Okay, so study comprises learning, analysis, has scope for further improvement. Okay. So, if I could try to perhaps focus on bringing together the different points that you're making, do you think it would be fair to say that academic writing, when we say it is something that we study? Okay, is this visible to all, the PPT now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So if I were to distinguish between, say, read and study, and do correct me, or let me know if you don't agree. But if at a very lay person's, in kind of layman's term, if I could say that See, I can read everything. I read a lot of things, but I don't let everything I read inform my opinion. राइट, मैं बहुत सारी चीजें फेसबुक पे पढ़ती हूँ, न्यूज़पेपर्स में पढ़ती हूँ, अलग अलग तरीके के मैगजीन्स आते हैं, उन्हें मैं पढ़ती हूँ, लेकिन हर चीज जो मैं पढ़ती हूँ, राइट, उससे मैं जरूरी नहीं है कि अपने ओपिनियंस को, अपने आइडियाज को इन्फॉर्म करूँ, राइट. But the moment somebody says this is an academic writing, right, I trust that piece more. I trust when somebody says it's an academic writing, because I believe that an academic writing is going to be based on some evidence, some logic, some expertise. Right? Nowadays we all say, matlab, how many of you are familiar with the term WhatsApp University? And there's a term that we use a lot, that are you all matlab ye kya WhatsApp University se dekha? What is our intention of saying WhatsApp University? That means when we are influenced by information whose sources we don't know, right? We don't, even during the time of pandemic, right? A lot of concern of the doctors were that everybody was trying to go on the internet, search on the Google what can be done, what cannot be done. You type anything on Google and 1,000 pages will open, right? How do you decide which page is to be trusted and which page is not to be trusted? There are as many opinions as there are people, right? So even if I am not feeling well, and if I want to just type in my symptoms and check what I may be having, right, I would also try to see whether this is an authentic information or not. So when we talk of academic writing, right, we are talking about a writing that is informed by some theory, by some conceptual understanding. It has a focus, it is evidence backed, and it is responsible, right? See, my training is in psychology and in education. So when I write something, right, why should my writing on why should you all be attending my workshop on what is academic writing? Somewhere when Dr. Rastogi, she introduced me, right? She said something that I've been holding these workshops, or I've been teaching for some time. Otherwise, I'm sure other people can also come and tell you about what is writing. Why should you think about or trust me to tell you what is academic writing? Because somewhere you feel, or you may have reasons to believe, that this is an area on which I have worked, in which I have read, and I've not just read some popular pieces. I have read works written by linguists, written by educational scholars, about what makes a writing academic, how is evidence collected. So there is an expertise, and that when we say academic expertise, means it's an expertise that comes from extensive studying, it comes from extensive research work, right? And that is what makes a writing academic. So what I write, I like writing. I write on Facebook, I write on blogs, but there what I write are my opinions. You may agree with them, you may not agree with them, right? Sometimes to back my opinion, I will also perhaps give some evidence, and it's up to you. But when I'm writing, say for a journal, when I'm writing an academic paper, right, I have to make sure that every even opinion that I express is responsible, is backed by information, is backed by evidence, is backed by conceptual understanding. Hence, if I were to even go to Google, the search engine, and look for medical advice, while it's not advisable, because two very similar symptoms can have very different etiologies, can happen because of very different reasons. So I'm not saying you should just Google search your symptoms and self-medicate or self-diagnose. But even suppose just for a very, very preliminary idea of what it might be, right? I will see whether the page that I've opened, is it from a medical journal? Is it written by a doctor? Is it written by a medical expert? Is it on a medical institution's website? Or is it just a page where I don't know whether it's a medical journal, I don't know whether it's a website of a hospital or any other medical training institution, I don't even know who the author is, I don't know whether the person who's written it is a doctor or not, then I shouldn't be, I should not be trusting that page, right? So academic writing is, we study it, like you all said, it's something that we study. We not only read it, but we study it because it is informed. Right? It's not just somebody's opinion that they just came up with. If you're reading some theories in psychology, some theories in linguistics, and we say you're studying them because they've not just been written at the impulse of a person. A lot of thought has gone into it. Right? A lot of effort has gone into it, and that effort includes, making sure that every sentence that is written in it is informed, is responsible. That if you ask me, why are you saying this? I can back it up with something. Right? So that is what academic writing is. So it's not just an opinion. Right? It means engagement and in-depth engagement with an area, right? So, and when we do academic writing, it is also important that we know how to identify academic and scholarly resources. I'm saying this, like I said, because today a lot is available on the internet, right? So, when we talk of academic writing, it's important. If I find a page on Google search, any page may not be good enough. I need to see where did I find it. Is it a page of a professionally or scholarly journal? Did I find it on JSTOR and Google Scholar? Which are websites with academic papers? Is it from a peer-reviewed journal? Which journal? Who's the author? Do I know who's the author? If I have a difference of opinion, if I need clarification, is there somebody I can reach out to? What is the process of publishing on this page? Right? Facebook में हम में से कोई कुछ भी लिख सकता है, as long as it doesn't violate their code of ethics or whatever it is. I can write whatever I want, right? If I'm writing about a pandemic, or I'm writing about what to do on pandemic, even if what I'm writing is not well informed, nobody will मेरा writing को Facebook publish करने से reject नहीं कर देगा, right? But when we know if something has been published in a journal, in an academic text, in an academic page, we know that it would not have been published as it is. They would have been people who would have verified it. They would have seen whether it is based on research. They would have seen whether it is based on a study of theoretical literature. Only when they see it is a responsible, backed by arguments piece with citation and references, do they publish it, which means it's an academic source, right? Is it if it's a long piece, are there citations, are there references at the end? जो claims उस piece में हो रहे हैं, क्या मुझे पता है वो claim कहाँ से आ रहा है? क्या राइटर ने लिखा है, उसने ये रिसर्च किया? अगर वो अपने रिसर्च के बेसिस पे कोई आर्ग्यूमेंट कर रहे हैं, is the methodology of the research clearly given? If I'm saying that I'm writing a paper and I'm like, I did a research and I found out this, and according to me, all teaching should be in English. Just because I've said I've done research doesn't mean that you have to believe it. You also need to know where I did my research. Did I do my research with my 2 children? Or did I do a research with a larger sample? Did I do a research in government school or a private school or both? what was the method of my doing research? If I'm saying this method is better, did I study only that method or did I compare it with other methods also, right? Or if I'm saying this person said so, that person said so, am I giving you the reference of where you can find what is the basis of that person saying this or that, right? So this is extremely important. If we don't know how to identify academic scholarly resources, chances are our own writing will also suffer from lack of academic values, right? So make sure कि जब आप कुछ सर्च भी करते हैं अपने टर्म पेपर्स के लिए, अपने असाइनमेंट्स के लिए, अपने रिसर्च के लिए, इंटरनेट हैज मेड अ लॉट ऑफ searches easy for us. अब आपको हर when we were doing our graduation or at least master's level research, we had to physically visit a lot of libraries, right? Now you have a lot of options of being able to find academic material on the internet. However, there is also a problem of plenty. इतना ज़्यादा material है कि आप उससे useful, verified academic material कैसे select करेंगे, वो बहुत ज़रूरी हो जाता है, right? So for instance, if I can give this example, I usually discourage students from citing from Wikipedia. I'm not saying don't refer to Wikipedia, right? If I want to watch a movie, I've heard a word for the first time. A lot of times, even I go to Wikipedia to see, okay, what does it mean? Okay, what is the plot line of this movie or this series? I do, if I've heard a name of a person for the first time, I may check it on Wikipedia, right? That information I get. But can anybody tell me why is Wikipedia not definitely an academic source? How many of you have used Wikipedia while writing a term paper or an assignment? यूज किया है कभी विकिपीडिया टर्म पेपर या असाइनमेंट करते हुए?
Yes, ma'am.
किया है, हाँ. So if I were to open a Wikipedia page, let me just show it to you 1 second. Okay, so I've opened a Wikipedia page, and suppose I want to find out about what are dreams. Sorry, I think I've opened a lot of pages because of it. Okay, dream. Now I search it. Right, so you can see that I may find a lot of ideas about what a dream is. It's a succession of images, ideas. There are a lot of definitions and all given. कईयों में references हैं, कईयों में references नहीं हैं. But अभी मैंने login नहीं किया है. If I could log in, you can, it's easy to, anybody can edit these sites. If I want, I can edit this site. I can change the content of it, right? कई बार इसमें लिखा होता है कि इन्होंने कुछ चीजें इन्होंने academic resources से ली है, कुछ हो सकता है academic resource से ना हो. Wikipedia might be a good preliminary research, looking material. I can see, okay, ये dreams के बारे में जो लिख रहे हैं कहाँ से लिखा है. This is from a National Institute of Neurobiology. Okay, this makes better sense. So I may use it to find out better research papers. But again, this is another Wikipedia page, right, which anybody could have edited. So I look for whether they have any academic source that they are working with. Right, so if let me open through this. Yeah, this seems to be an academic journal. It's a journal on which they've written about dream and the brain. This is an academic resource. So Wikipedia led me to this, but Wikipedia by itself is not an academic source, right? So academic writing, if I can come back to it, is a form of writing, like I said, which is informed, which is responsible, which is where every claim that you make is backed by evidence. वो evidence अगर आपके research से आ रहा है तो आपको अपना method बताना पड़ेगा. वो evidence अगर किसी को quote करके आ रहा है तो आपको वो citation देना पड़ेगा. Right? So in academic writing, one of the things that I've edited books, I also regularly review papers for journals. So what will not be academic writing is, suppose a lot of people tend to start writing their papers with, everybody thinks that. How do you know what everybody thinks? This everybody thinks is also a claim. Can I back this claim? How do I prove that everybody thinks? या तो हो सकता है कि कुछ, if in India I say everybody speaks this language, and there has been a census done by the government that covered all the people and that said that everybody speaks this language, then I will have to write, when it comes to it, I will have to write that everybody speaks, for instance, I'll have to write it this way. Everybody thinks, and here I will write that, say population survey or census, everybody speaks, everybody in India can speak, suppose I say can speak Hindi or English, right? Any language. If I'm saying this, I have to back it by evidence. So I'll have to say, ये किस census के basis पे मैं बोल रही हूँ. So if there is a census like this, I will have to cite it and then give its reference. If I don't do this, then this is an unverified, unsubstantiated claims. We can't make them in academic writing, right? So academic writing, usually there are different kinds of academic writing. What I will do today is I will focus on different kinds of academic writings and on the blueprint of how to write. When we say we are going to write, what is the blueprint? How do we structure an academic writing? और ये जो आज जिन चीजों को मैं कवर करूंगी, वो आपके टर्म पेपर के लिए, आप अगर कुछ असाइनमेंट लिख रहे हैं, ऐसे लिख रहे हैं, उन चीजों के लिए भी शायद यूजफुल होगा, right? So this is what we are going to discuss today. The structure and some of the main kinds of writing that one is expected to do as a graduate and an undergraduate student. Right? So let me begin with, so when are you all with me till now? Is it making sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, जहाँ पे आपको लगे कि कुछ दोबारा से रिपीट करने की जरूरत है, do let me know. Okay, so now coming to, जब आपको, what are the kind of assessments you have? Do you have term papers? Do you have only end of in class, end semester exams? What are the kind of assessments that you normally get? Are you asked to write term papers or long essays?
Ma'am, assignments?
हाँ, किस तरीके के assignments? Like, can you tell me a question? What kind of assignment, an example of an assignment that you may have received? आपको असाइनमेंट में मतलब क्या टास्क मिलता है? When you get an assignment, what form is the assignment is? Are you asked to write something? Are you asked to do a presentation? Are you asked to do a group work? किस तरीके के सवाल होते हैं असाइनमेंट में? क्या वो MCQs होता है? What is the nature of the assessments that you get in different courses?
Ma'am, as an undergraduate, we get to write something, and then we have to make a presentation on that particular topic.
Okay, you have to write something and then make a presentation on it, right? So can you give me some topic that you may be asked to write on, or that you may have been asked to write on in recent past? कोई भी एक सवाल जो आपने रिसेंटली आपने जिस पे असाइनमेंट किया हो.
Schools of psychology.
Okay, so schools of psychology पे सवाल क्या था? What are the schools? बोलो बोलो, sorry.
Different kinds of different types of schools of psychology, and
Okay.
in detail.
So let me just write it. What are the different
Schools of psychology.
Different schools of psychology, and
we had to give detailed presentation about them.
okay, and make a detailed presentation. Okay, now see, when we talk about academic writing, right, usually we are responding to a question or a topic, or we have an object of inquiry. So that is what should be the guiding thing for us, right? जैसे अगर मैं बोलूं, what are the different schools of psychology, let me write 4 questions. Okay, the first question is, अगर इसी से मैं लेके आपको लिखूं, discuss different schools of psychology, or मतलब in other words, what are the different, briefly describe what are the different schools of psychology, right? Or briefly describe different schools of psychology, right? अगर ये सवाल है तो आप क्या आंसर में लिखोगे? अगर इस पे आपको बोला जाए आपको 1000 वर्ड्स का एक आंसर लिखना है, आप क्या लिखोगे उस पे? मतलब व्हाट डू यू थिंक, हाउ विल यू वांट टू स्टार्ट दैट आंसर?
I will want to start with the first school of psychology.
Okay.
And carry on with the others, while in detail explaining who was the pioneer of that school and what he talked about it, and with a few examples.
Right, so if I'm getting it right, so how you will begin on this is, what was the first school of psychology? So I may start with structuralism. Who was the pioneer? I'll write about Wilhelm Wundt. I will write about, what he said should be the subject matter of psychology, what should be the method of psychology. Then I'll move to maybe functionalist, then behaviorist, psychoanalyst, humanistic psychologist, and so on, right?
Yes.
That's how you'll go about it, right? Now, suppose my question is slightly worded slightly differently. Now, this question is critically examine different schools of psychology. Now, how would you structure this question? How would you structure the response?
I might explain in detail the school with my personal opinions about this.
Okay, you'll now here see, अगर आपके word limit है, right? Suppose इस question का word limit था 1000 words, और इस सवाल का भी word limit है 1000 words. तो अगर 1000 words में आप describe ही कर रहे हो, and then you write one line of opinion, right? Then you've actually missed most of the question. क्योंकि डिस्क्रिप्शन नहीं पूछा था, राइट? आपको क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन करने के लिए थोड़ा डिस्क्रिप्शन की जरूरत डेफिनेटली है, लेकिन सवाल डिस्क्रिप्शन के बारे में है नहीं, राइट। तो पहली चीज है हमारा आंसर, क्योंकि हमारे को वर्ड लिमिट भी होती है। सपोज इट्स एन इन क्लास एग्जाम जिसमें आपके पास टाइम ही उतना है, इट्स इम्पोर्टेंट फॉर अस टू फर्स्ट फिगर आउट कि सवाल में फोकस क्या है, और जो सवाल का फोकस है उस पे आपको ज्यादा लिखना है, राइट। तो अगर क्वेश्चन है क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन डिफरेंट स्कूल्स ऑफ साइकोलॉजी, if my question was discuss different schools of psychology, I may, it's always a good idea to structure your answer this way. You have an introduction. So in my introduction, I may want to mention what is what is psychology, what kind of a discipline it is, just in a line, and what are different schools of psychology, what does schools of psychology even mean. So my introduction, I may have, psychology is a discipline that focuses on study of mind and behavior. In psychology, there have been different debates about what should be the subject matter of psychology and what should be the methods of psychology. Depending on the focus of the subject matter and methodology, there have been different schools, they have been discussed below. So there will be an introduction that will explain the key words. Right? Always begin with an introduction. Then I'll come to schools of psychology, and then I will say, usme bhi, so what makes a school of psychology psychology? It is what they thought is to be the subject matter and what they thought should be the methodology. So I can mention Wilhelm Wundt started as this, but I will not go into one paragraph discussing the author. I'll straight away come to the point that the first school of psychology was structuralism. It was started by this person. According to them, the subject matter of psychology was this, the key method was this, and then maybe an example or so. Right? And then move to the next school. So my focus will be to explain what it's there, to describe. And then in the end, I will write conclusion. Right? There should always be an introduction and a conclusion. In conclusion, I can say, that whether that today, in today's context, while some schools of psychology have survived, other schools of psychology may have informed new schools, but they don't continue as such. So we really don't have structuralism as such today, but we do hear of, psychoanalysis, we do hear of how humanistic psychology, Carl Rogers' work still continues to inform. So I may have some brief comment on that. Now, if my task is to critically examine, that means so I'll have to straight away start with just maybe one line on what that school is, and then discuss, what merit does it have. And I will come to the critical examination also, but the focus will now change, right? So let me come back to the presentation. Usually when you're writing your assignments, you're writing your essays, या आपको एग्जाम में भी क्वेश्चन आंसर आते हैं सोशल साइंसेस, ह्यूमैनिटीज में, you'll find that largely the focus either will be something that we call descriptive writing, right? Descriptive writing is when the question wants you to define something, explain something, summarize something. Okay? We use these questions, बहुत बार लगता है कि ये तो रट्टा मारने वाले सवाल हैं, सिर्फ इंफॉर्मेशन सेंट्रिक सवाल हैं, बट इन सवालों का भी एक अहमियत है. These questions are focused on the teacher being able to evaluate whether you have mastered the content. Okay? And mastery of content is important. अगर आपने कंटेंट ही नहीं समझा है, आपने कंटेंट से ही एंगेज नहीं किया है, तो फिर आप उस पे अपना ओपिनियन कैसे देंगे, right? And we usually go step by step. So in undergraduate years, in first semester or second semester, or the beginning of even in the first few semesters of post-graduation, you may find that there are a lot of questions which focus on descriptive writing, that is, to see whether you have understood the content of a particular theorist or a particular theory, or whatever the concept is, right? And because only once you know the content can you critique it, can you apply it, can you reflect on it, right? I mean, nowadays we also have a society, I mean, we are moving to a generation or times where we have more opinions than we have information, right? लेकिन आप ओपिनियन बनने में टाइम लगना बुरी बात नहीं है. What is important is whether your opinion is informed or not, right? And as academics, as future research scholars, future teachers, as people who are engaged in scholarly pursuits, what is important is the process through which you arrive at your opinions, right? Agar main, say if I'm as an education person, whose editorials in newspapers do I find? Many people, education is one discipline जिसमें हर एक का कोई opinion है, right? Why do some people's opinion matter to me more? Because I know they have worked for decades in schools and higher education. They have understood the system. They have read the theories, right? And now they have been able to, synthesize their theories with their work. So now when they talk about their opinion is not coming from a space of misinformation or some propaganda. They know what they are talking about, right? That is why mastery of content in academics is important. It is only once you've done that can you move on to next stages. So descriptive writing is when it comes to questions where you're asked to define, summarize, document, explain, right? And for example, if I say, what is mediation? What is this? These are descriptive writing questions, okay? In descriptive writing questions, or what was Tagore's idea on education? In descriptive writing question, I'm required to read the works carefully. जो रीडिंग्स असाइन किया है उसको केयरफुली पढ़ना है, इन आइडियाज को एक्सप्लेन करना है, और साथ में लिखना है कि ऑथर इन आइडियाज पे कहां से आए. What are the supporting arguments, right? So if I'm writing a descriptive essay, right? So for example, if my question is, what are the schools of psychology, is a descriptive writing, right? I will have an introduction, then there will be main content, the main body of what I'm writing. Again, when it comes to the main body of what I'm writing, my main content also, this becomes my blueprint. So I will talk about school 1. My focus will be subject matter of the school, what did they think it should be, and the methodology. So, or maybe I do it this way, school 2, school 1. Isme I will first talk about who established it, when, what was considered to be the subject matter, what was the methodology, right? And similarly, the same structure I will follow. And then in the end, I will have a concluding section. Now, remember one thing, there are two concepts here which become important. There is something that we call direct quoting and paraphrasing. Okay. See, जब आपको अगर बोला जा रहा है कि discuss Freud's work, discuss Bakhtin's work, discuss Noam Chomsky's work, right? You are not being asked what you think about it. जैसे मैंने कहा, descriptive questions focus on your understanding of content, right? So you have to realize that what we are asking you is, what does this person say? Not what do you think this person says. There is a difference, right? So to respond to what does this person say, you have to read what this person has said carefully, right? So if my question, say it was on, say, Tagore's idea on education, right? And I have a fixed word limit. तो टैगोर ने बहुत सारी किताबें लिखी, अब मैं सबके बारे में तो नहीं लिख सकती हूँ, right? So I'll of course begin with an introduction which will talk about maybe one line about who Tagore was, what were his major works on education. So I can write, who Rabindranath Tagore was. He was a writer, he was an educationist, he also played a role in the freedom movement. His contribution to education came in form of his writings and the fact that he started universities. And then, so I will have an introduction that will give me a context, right? So your introduction is something that does context building. कि आप किस चीज के बारे में लिखने वाले हो, क्या लिखने वाले हो, right? So it is context building, some kind of background or rationale, things like that. Then it comes to the main piece, your main substance, the main part, main argument, the main substance of your piece, so here I will pick up, if I'm writing about Tagore's ideas on education, right? It's important for me to structure it in a way that it becomes easy for the reader to know. So instead of writing Tagore said this, Tagore said this, Tagore said this, Tagore said this, usse mujhe, reader ko, see, why do as teachers we give you a question? I want to understand, have you been able to make sense of it? तो अगर आप देख के सिर्फ ये लिख रहे हो, he said this, he said this, he said this, I still don't know whether you've understood that he said this, right? So for a good description, I should also be able to read the text and see what are the themes that are emerging, right? So I may say that main substance of his ideas, he focused on holistic education, an education that was close to nature. He talked about his ideas, he was keen on education that is scientific, or that, builds reason, that is based on reason. Aesthetics were important. So these were some of the key ideas. And for each ideas, I will write an explanation as to how did he explain these ideas. So what did he talk about holistic education? उनके रीडिंग्स में क्या पढ़ के मुझे लगता है कि होलिस्टिक एजुकेशन के बारे में वो बात कर रहे हैं. क्लोज टू नेचर, उनके राइटिंग्स में क्या पढ़ के मुझे लगता है कि वो इस चीज की बात कर रहे हैं, राइट? या अगर कोई स्टेजेस ऑफ डेवलपमेंट है फ्रॉइड का, तो उसमें मुझे बहुत सोचने की जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी, वो स्टेजेस दिए ही हुए हैं, राइट? ओरल, एनल. So, but I should know what I have to write in also. What is the major source of pleasure here? Which years it happens in? What are the major conflicts? How does it get resolved? And extremely important when you're doing this kind of work is paraphrasing. Paraphrasing means writing in your own words. You're writing that person's idea, but try to quote less. If agar aapne बस आप text according to Freud and then you copy the paragraph, then according to Freud and you copy the paragraph. Now, as a teacher, I can read it in the book myself. If you're just copying, I know कि आपको, you know where to identify the answer, right? As all I can get to know is कि हाँ, आपको पता है कि आंसर था कहाँ पर, लेकिन आप क्या समझे हो, जब तक आप उसको अपने शब्दों में नहीं लिखोगे, it will become difficult for a teacher to figure out, right? That is why we also give word limit, right? Word limit means, agar, every reading will be say for 4-5 pages. If you've read the whole reading, are you able to summarize it? Are you able to pick up key points? So in descriptive writing, reading becomes, how do you do note making becomes important. So if you have reading, say, on ideas of Bourdieu, right? How will you write about it, right? Discuss the ideas of Bourdieu as in this paper, right? So again, there will be an introduction. I may say that these ideas are drawn from this work of Bourdieu, who Bourdieu was. Then I will come to the main body of the answer, in which I will read the paper and identify what are the 4 main ideas, 5 main ideas, 4 major arguments that are being made. So I highlight them and then I write about the first main argument, idea, and then how is he building it, uska matlab kya hai aur wo kaise usko justify karte hain, second kya hai, and then I come to conclusions. कई बार हो सकता है कि एक आइडिया 3-4 पैराग्राफ्स में आ रहा है, तो आप उसको 3-4 बार नहीं लिखोगे. So you have to read it, identify what is being said, be able to summarize it and build your answer. right? But you have to stay close to the text. Okay. And like I said, paraphrasing is important in this because we are trying to see whether you've understood or not. And is descriptive writing clear? Please do
Yes.
stop me if
Yes.
it is.
Yes, ma'am.
Uh,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, right. Then we have analytical writing, right? Analyze Bourdieu's work, analyze Freud's work. Are you familiar with these kind of questions? Have these questions been asked?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? अब एनालाइजिंग और डिस्क्रिप्शन में क्या फर्क है? कभी कभी हम डिस्क्रिप्शन में भी एनालिसिस कर ही देते हैं. एनालिसिस मतलब वी आर गोइंग बियॉन्ड व्हाट इज बीन सेड टू लुकिंग एट व्हाट कैटेगरीज इमर्ज, राइट? तो अगर फॉर एग्जांपल इफ आई एम सेइंग briefly explain Sigmund Freud's work, right? Then my focus will be Sigmund Freud talked about personalities, and he talked about stages of development. While talking about human mind and personality, he talked about id, ego, superego, and conscious and unconscious. In stages of development, he talked about all this. So I'm focusing on the content. If my question is analyze Freud's work, now I want to see what is significant in Freud's work. जो वो माइंड के बारे में बोल रहे हैं, जो वो स्टेजेस ऑफ डेवलपमेंट के बारे में बोल रहे हैं, उनमें क्या पैटर्न्स नजर आ रहे हैं, राइट? सो देन रीडिंग दैट आई मे फाइंड दैट व्हेन आई लुक एट फ्रॉइड्स वर्क एंड हिज आइडियाज, some things that become clear is the emphasis on sexuality, emphasis on infantile sexuality, the emphasis on unconscious. Similarly, आप कोई काम कर रहे, अच्छा, it may help me a bit if you could, what are the subjects that you all read? I mean, you all are students of linguistics, am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So suppose agar my background is not in linguistics, so I mean, do correct me if I get something wrong. But suppose if I were to talk about, say, if I were to write about, say, Vygotsky's ideas on language, right? Or if my question is describe Vygotsky's work on language, if it is only about description, I will write that he considered language to be an active cultural tool. That language emerged from social interactions and then they became, part or components of our thinking. So I'll write those parts. If it comes to examining, right? Examining means now I'm also trying to find out categories. So when I say ki wo usko active, when Vygotsky is saying that language is something that also constitutes, wo passive nahi hai, right? So if I'm examining, of course, if I were to for instance, just a second. Okay, right. So if I were to say describe or explain Vygotsky's ideas on language, right? So again, I'll definitely have an introduction on, Vygotsky was a socio-cultural theorist. He worked on ideas of development, and what he was really interested in is about functioning of human mind, especially the higher cognitive functions and so on. Then I'll come to the main body. अब डिस्क्रिप्शन में भी देखो, कई बार ना इन कैटेगरीज को बहुत क्लियरली आप सेपरेट नहीं कर सकते हैं. जब आप डिस्क्राइब करना शुरू करोगे, आप देखोगे आपके कुछ एनालिसिस निकल ही आएगा, या आप बिना डिस्क्राइब किए एनालिसिस कर ही नहीं सकते हो, राइट? बट अगेन, इफ आई एम राइटिंग अबाउट, so he wrote about that language is used, language is a cultural tool. It is used for interpersonal communication and for thinking. So I will write mainly what is the focus of the ideas. If I was doing examining Vygotsky's ideas on language, right? If this was the question, in my introduction, Of course, it will be similar, and I will talk about what work he did. Now, यहाँ पे I may introduction main body में I may begin with some bit of descriptive part that he talks about language as a cultural tool. It's used for interpersonal communication and all, and then my focus largely will be on so what emerges about language in Vygotsky's writing. So one thing that emerges is because he's talking of language as a tool and not as a means, right? So that means he looks at language as an act. Language is active. It's not a passive means of communication, right? So imagining language as active. Then when he's talking about interpersonal communication and then thinking he's talking about, that means social situatedness of language. Now, these are categories. Right, so here I was just describing, he said this, he said this, he said that. Now I'm trying to make sense of what he said. I'm trying to group them into themes. So wherever he's talking about language as an artifact, language as a tool, I'm saying that these means that for him, language was something which was active, which was also shaping things and not just being shaped, right? When he talks about that language first originates in interpersonal interactions, that language becomes important in social participation and all of that. So I'm talking about social situatedness of languages, right? He's talking about pedagogic significance of dialogues. जब आप बात करते हो, how do you in talking you move from everyday to abstract, from spontaneous to more scientific. So this is coming from this only, right? But you see, examining means now we are not just repeating what he's saying, we are not just paraphrasing, we are also trying to see what categories emerge, right? Yes, I can see there's a question. Ajit, please go ahead.
Sorry, ma'am, it's not a question. I just wanted to let you know whatever you are writing is not visible to us. I think you are writing something in the background, and you want us to see all those things.
Sure.
It is not visible to us.
Okay, I'll just share that again. I'm so sorry. Okay, is this visible, this page now?
It is, ma'am. It is, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Okay, right. So what I was saying is that, if the idea is of describe Vygotsky's ideas on language, I'll have an introduction where I'll write who he was, where he came from, what he talked about language. I will paraphrase it and so on, right? But if my question is largely descriptive, if my question is examine or analyze Vygotsky's work, then that means I need to go beyond description to see what are the patterns that are emerging, right? Like for instance, agar koi theory of development hai, I may write, if I have to say examine Piaget's theory of development, I may he talks about different stages, he talks about cognitive development, he talks about this, but in examining, I will go more than description to say, okay, it is a constructivist theory because he's talking about active constructions. Then on examining Piaget's theory, I find that according to Piaget, child is an active being. It's a stage theory, right? It's a theory that is not, in the nature versus nurture debate. Ki hamara development sirf biologically determined hai ya environmentally determined hai. He gives a lot of importance to environment, but he gives, for him, it's an interactive thing. Right? So he talks about interaction between nature and nurture. So that becomes analysis, where you're able to figure out certain themes in what is being said. Is it making sense, this part? What do we mean when we say analyze or examine?
Yes, ma'am.
कि अगर सवाल सिर्फ इतना है, can you see the PPT now? No.
Yes, ma'am. It is whatever you are writing is visible, not the PPT.
Okay. I think I need to just share it. Just share the full screen desktop.
Actually, ma'am, you are sharing a window, not the full screen. That is the reason. Yeah. Now your PPT.
Now you will be able to see whatever I'm writing. So see, what I'm saying is, in descriptive writing, the focus is on the content. In analytical writing, we go beyond description to look at, okay, so what are the categories? Is it, are they looking at passive view of human or active view of human? Depending, if you're as students of language, maybe आप जब different लोगों के theories को पढ़ेंगे, you may talk about whether it's a structuralist approach, it's a functionalist approach, it sees language as passive or it sees language as active, it sees language as something which is pre-programmed into human beings, or it is something that develops through social interactions. So these are analysis, right? किसी ने कुछ कह दिया है, अब मैं बोल रही हूँ ये structuralist था, अब उन्होंने जो लिखा है उसको पढ़ के मैं बोल रही हूँ दिस इज अ स्टेज थ्योरी, जो उन्होंने लिखा है उसको पढ़ के मैं बोल रही हूँ दिस टेंड्स टू टेक द biological view of it, it tends to take a hereditary view of it. These are all analysis. When we start seeing patterns, we start seeing similarities, that means now I'm also trying to draw conclusion. I'm not just saying Freud said this. I'm also concluding that Freud emphasized on this. In his imagination, human beings largely came from a position of dysfunctionality, or for him unconscious was more important, more defining of our personalities than this. So what is it that we can infer? हम उससे हमको क्या पता लगता है, राइट? डिस्क्रिप्टिव में हम बताते हैं ये उन्होंने कहा है, ये ऐसा है, ये ऐसे एक्सप्लेन किया है. एनालिटिकल राइटिंग में हम एक स्टेज आगे जाके उसको समझने की कोशिश करते हैं कि अगर उन्होंने ये सब लिखा है, इसका मतलब है वो ये कहना चाह रहे हैं. If Tagore is saying education should be outside, it should be, we should talk about reason, we should talk about this, that means he sees, it should include music, it should include this, it should include this. Then I can say, I infer, my analysis is that his idea of education is more holistic. He doesn't see education only as reading, writing. For him, arts, doing any kind of skill work was as much a part of education. Right? So that is my analysis, that I'm inferring something from it. Is it making sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Right. Then sometimes you will also have critically analyze, write a critical essay. Right? What does that mean? Now, after examining माने आप देखते हो कि उसमें क्या inference है, हम उसको evaluate भी करते हैं. So when we write critically examine or write a critical essay on something, a topic, write a critical essay on role of social media in education. So critical essay means, of course, I will briefly describe the role. I will briefly describe what social media is. I will do some analysis. It requires, it connects people. It does this, it does that. Critical means now I will examine. One thing which is important to remember in critical, the term critical does not mean criticize. Okay. In academics, when we say critically examine or critically evaluate or write a critical essay on, it doesn't mean we are asking you to criticize. To be critical means that anything that is said to us, we examine it in light of other evidences and literature. Right? So if, for example, if I read, say, if if I've been asked to write something, critically examine, the behavioral understanding, behaviorists or, a behaviorist's understanding of learning. So critical would mean, okay, I will look at, okay, this is learned by punishment. आप अगर punishment दोगे तो behavior decrease होगा, reinforcement दोगे तो behavior increase होगा, right? This is description. This analysis will be that this is largely a nature focused view, right? कि nature determine करती है. It's not natural. You're not born with learnings. Depending on how the environment responds to you, you will either learn more or you will learn less. अब critical क्या होगा? When somebody says, when there is this line that, you know, if you reinforce something, I will do it more. If you punish me, I will do it less. I may want to cite, you know, certain instances where this doesn't explain, right? I may cite things where it has been significant. So when critical examine means that I can say that, you know, a lot of these principles have been used in counseling, in clinical settings to help children get rid of undesired habits and strengthen desired habits. However, there are also many behaviors that cannot be explained through this. You know, many of us, you know, for instance, how do you understand freedom movement? Many people who fought for the independence of our country, be it Mahatma Gandhi, be it Bhagat Singh, they knew that whatever they do will not be rewarded. They might not even live to see the freedom. They knew that the punishment was assured, and yet the certainty of the punishment did not weaken their behavior. It only strengthened their behavior, right? So critical analysis means I'm saying, okay, this is what the theory helps us do. उसका ये एविडेंस है, ये यहाँ पे यूज हुआ है, यहाँ पे यूज हुआ है, ऐसे यूज हुआ है, and also what are the limitations that, you know, despite this it is unable to explain these behaviors in these situations. It is not you know, it doesn't help. But even critical examination has to come from evidences and your reading of other books. It is not simply what you feel like, right? See, यहाँ पे मैं ये नहीं कह रही हूँ कि आपका ओपिनियन, आपके व्यूज मैटर नहीं करते हैं, लेकिन आपके ओपिनियंस और व्यूज शेप कैसे हुए हैं. शुरुआत में तो आपके ओपिनियंस और यू नो व्यूज भी, if I'm saying this doesn't work, right? See, if I have, as a student of undergraduate or postgraduate studies in psychology, how can I say whether Freud makes sense or not? मैं तो किसी clinical setting में गई ही नहीं थी, मैं therapy नहीं कर रही थी, right? If I'm in the field, I can say, okay, you know, Freud's theory is not helping me, but Skinner's theory is helping me. Or when I was engaging with theories of education, how do I decide whether Vygotsky's work is helping me or Dewey's work is helping me? I'm not in the field. In the field, I can still say, you know, I tried to use this approach with students, it did not work. So that means there are shortcomings to this approach. When I'm not in the place to test it, then I have to read other literature and see what are the limitations and strengths. Like I said, in academics, please note that every claim that we make has to be backed by evidence, right? And in academics also, you know, my experience cannot be evidence for generalization. If I'm critiquing something, क्योंकि मेरे साथ ऐसा नहीं हुआ, I can say that this theory doesn't explain some occurrences. My not experiencing it does not disprove, right? मेरा experience से मैं generalize नहीं कर सकती हूँ ना, सबके साथ वैसा होगा. So one has to be very, so description means you describe, examining something means you try to pick out some meaning, some themes which emerge, you try to see some patterns in it. Critically writing means you try to evaluate what are the strengths, what are the limitations, backed by evidence, other literature and logic. It simply doesn't mean criticize, right? Your critical analysis should also be based on some foundations, right? So for example, in critical analytical thinking, you know, is what things, the things that we will focus on, how we will focus on would be, you know, is the line of reasoning good? What is the conclusion? For example, if I'm critically analyzing a research, suppose एक research आया है जो मैंने पढ़ा है जिसमें लिखा है कि you know, copying alphabets, right? copying from blackboard is the best way to teach writing. And there is somebody who's written a research and I'm asked to critically analyze it. Now I'll see what is the theory they are drawing from. ये जो वो argument बोल रहे हैं कि copying से writing help होता है, what have they been informed from? What are the works they have read? How strong is the evidence? What methodology did they use? Right, a lot of, for example, social science में बहुत सारे theories का critique evidence के basis पे होता है कि this theory when it was developed, on whom was it developed? What was the population? So today when we say, that a lot of theories are not suitable for us because they have a Western origin, what are we trying to say? We are trying to say that, the sample on which this theory was built was largely of European or American origin. Usme bhi largely whites, people who had access to educational institutions. So उस sample से develop किया हुआ theory हो सकता है हमारे context में relevant ना रहे. Right? So here, how am I critiquing a theory? By saying that, the evidence on which it is based is very selective. It's something like, जब हम इलेक्शन से पहले बहुत सारे एग्जिट पोल्स पे आपने बहुत सारा डिबेट सुना होगा, आर ओपिनियन पोल्स क्रेडिबल, आर एग्जिट पोल्स क्रेडिबल, एंड व्हेन पीपल आर्ग्यू, राइट, what is the argument that they make, right? How do they argue? They will say, this is a very good exit poll क्योंकि जो सैंपल हमने लिया था that is like the real population. अगर पॉपुलेशन में इतने मेल्स हैं, इतने फीमेल्स हैं, इतने रिलीजन के लोग हैं, इतने कास्ट सब कास्ट के लोग हैं, हमने सबका रिप्रेजेंटेशन लिया है. We've tried to make sure it's it's representative, so it's a good evidence. Somebody else may argue, if I come across a study that says this party is winning, I will ask, where did you do the sample? If they say we did sample outside this place, now if this place comes in a particular region that has a certain ideological bent, then I can say अगर आपने सारे यहाँ से लिए थे, हो सकता है पूरे इलेक्शन में सिर्फ यही लोग वहां पे वोट करें, उसके अलावा और कोई ना करे. और your exit poll will show, your poll is showing me 100% will vote for this. Your sampling is biased, right? These are the logic on which we critique, right? So critical, how, what are the underlying assumptions? When I say a child is taught best through practice and repetition, what am I assuming? I'm assuming that, it's repeating that will strengthen the behavior, not conceptual understanding, right? So in academic writing, your critique cannot come from the spaces, I don't like it, I don't agree with it, why don't you agree with it? It's not a comment that we are making on aesthetics or fashion. You may like what I'm wearing, or you may not like what I'm wearing. I may be liking what I'm wearing, right? It's not that subjective. That critique has to be based on evidences, on certain line of arguments. So is the reasoning good enough? Was this theory built from some evidences? Is there research to back it? What are the underlying assumptions, right? How well are the reasons documented? Is it making sense? Is it?
Yes, ma'am.
So, right, so a part of, and this is extremely important even when we think of ourselves as citizens. जब हम बोलते हैं critique करना, सवाल पूछना, उसमें मतलब ये नहीं है कि हमको criticize करना है. उसका मतलब सिर्फ ये है कि जो भी information हमारे पास आती है, हम उसको naively, innocently सब से आई है, इसका basis क्या है? अगर कोई बोल रहा है growth rate इतना बड़ा है, तो have they shown me what was it before? What are the parameters? How have they calculated? कितने लोगों का income calculate किया है? किस basis पे किया है? Right? A lot of times, for example, many people might critique कि जो below the poverty line के जो definitions होते हैं, whether it is helpful or not helpful, right? I may say that if you're only calculating the income of a household without calculating how many dependents are there, whether they have 6 children or they have 2 children, and so on and so forth, it may not really help much, right? So where is my critique coming from is important, okay? And then you have reflective writing. Reflective writing is, where we also, of course, जब हम academics कर रहे हैं, जब हम subject से engage कर रहे हैं, it's not just about accumulating information after information, right? We also hope that we will become more open-minded, more nuanced people as we engage with those theories, right? If I'm reading educational theory, psychology, over the years, it's not like कि मैंने बस theories पकड़ के मुझे पता है फ्रॉइड ने ये बोला, इसने ये बोला, इसने ये बोला. As a person, I hope I have also grown a little where I can probably give more benefit of doubt to people, knowing, कि हर बार लोग जैसे a lot of theories tell us, that we don't always act as per our personality. We also act per situations, right? So I hope that somewhere down the line, right, the educational theories, the psychological theories would have also impacted in how I see the world, how I relate to the world, right? If I'm reading educational theories, am I reading it only to write papers, or does it begin to reflect in my teaching also, right? So reflective writing is when we read something and then we use it to focus on how we are, and it's not about कि मैं क्या सोच रही हूँ. Reflection होगा कि जब मैंने ये पढ़ा, right, what emotions, what ideas, what questions did it evoke within me? Why did it make me feel this way? वो why बहुत important है, right? Emotions को identify, emotion को express करना reflection नहीं है. मैं खुश हूं, मैं बोलूं I like it, that's an inference I've made, right? That's my emotional expression. Reflection is, why do I like it? What is it in me that makes me like it, right? What makes me question it? If I go as a student of education, if I go to a field, I'm observing classroom, my reflection can't be I loved what the teacher did. Why did I love what the teacher did? What did I expect the teacher to be doing? And why does it make, I was surprised the teacher did it. So the point is not that I'm surprised. Reflection means, what makes me surprised? Was I not expecting the teacher to do this? Why was I not expecting the teacher to do this? अगर एक टीचर क्लास में स्टूडेंट्स को बहुत encourage कर रही है, and instead of saying that, I appreciate it, I say I was surprised. Why was I surprised? That means I was not expecting the teacher to be encouraging students. Why was I not expecting it? हमारे B.Ed के courses, B.Ed के courses में तो है कि teachers को ऐसे करना चाहिए, तो ये मुझे surprise क्यों करता है? When I explore deeper, I may find probably because my teacher didn't encourage me, right? So I will know, okay, so then I'm being able to reflect that if I, usually होता है कि मेरी teacher ऐसे पढ़ाती थी, इसका मतलब सब teachers ऐसे पढ़ाती हैं. Now reading this, going to the field, I'm realizing that was not the only way, right? That becomes a point of learning, right? Reflections will become learning when we are able to, there is cognition means thinking, right? मैं याद कर रही हूँ, मैं सोच रही हूँ, मैं डिसाइड कर रही हूँ, ये कॉग्निशन है. एक होता है मेटा कॉग्निशन, व्हेन यू थिंक अबाउट योर थिंकिंग. मैं ऐसे क्यों सोच रही हूँ, मैं ऐसे क्यों फील कर रही हूँ, मुझे ये देख के ऐसा क्यों लगा, right? And that will help, that will also create insights for future research, right? Why is it surprising me? What happened differently here? That may give me certain new theoretical insights, right? So reflective writing, again, reflective writing may be, you should know the content, right? You should have been able to examine it, to evaluate it. Only then, you will be able to meaningfully explore what you're feeling about it, right? And like I said, in different types of writing में ना एक clear cut difference नहीं है. One leads to another. कई बार आप जब descriptive writing करेंगे, आपके conclusion में reflections और critical evaluations आ सकते हैं. right? आप critical evaluation कर रहे हैं किसी चीज का, आपके introduction में थोड़ा descriptive आ सकता है, main body will be on examining strengths and limitations, आपके conclusions में थोड़ा reflections आ सकता है, right? So they also interact. So any doubt till here? Okay, I'm assuming there isn't. And as teachers also, when we are saying this, of course, some bit of it is also our responsibility. We need to clearly communicate expectations to the students कि हम क्या expect कर रहे हैं एक assignment से. हम application पे ध्यान देंगे, हम conceptual clarity पे ध्यान देंगे, हम examples में ध्यान देंगे. What is it that we want to see, right? What is it that I will be looking at? Right. So, for instance, very recently, I had given I was teaching a text from John Dewey, Experience and Education, जिसमें John Dewey बताते हैं कि educative experience क्या है, miseducative experience क्या है. So, I wanted them to watch a movie, right? That is based on a teaching learning thing, right? तो तारे ज़मीं पे है, हिचकी है, बहुत सारे ऐसे movies हैं जो teaching methods पे या एक educational setup पे based हैं. Freedom Writers, Dead Poets Society, there are a lot of movies like that. So each student had to select one movie and use that movie to explain John Dewey's idea of educative and miseducative, right? So in that I had to clearly communicate to students कि मैं उस movie का review नहीं मांग रही. I am not worried about what the camera angles were, what was the gender understanding of the movie, what was the cast understanding of the movie. I'm not looking at those aspects. I just want you to see whether movie gives you some examples of what was educative and what was miseducative, and you have to explain that. So I have to clearly communicate. Again, as a teacher, I can't assume that students will already understand what I mean by critical and analytical and reflective and distinguish between and synthesize and compare. So that training I need to impart. It helps to share an assessment rubric with students कि कितने mark arguments के होंगे, कितने supporting evidence के होंगे, कितने conclusions के होंगे, कितने presentation style के होंगे. That usually helps students a lot, right? And a detailed feedback really helps. Right, so this is just, usually when I give a question in classes, I try to give what am I expecting in terms of, what is the evaluation criteria. So the evaluation criteria will be understanding of concept as reflected in example. So if my question is on write an example for each of these concepts, right? Then I would give more marks to how appropriate that example is. अगर आपने definition right लिखा है, example सही नहीं किया है, आप ये नहीं बोल सकते हैं, तो at least मुझे 10 में से 5 marks तो दीजिए, because I wanted to understand through the example whether you've understood or not. Definition तो आपको book से आ ही जाएगा, right? So that has to be clearly communicated. Having said this, now I'll move and I'll do this very briefly today. I'll give you one task that you can bring in tomorrow, and we will expand on this, which is about, an approach to writing. How do we move towards writing, right? हमने जो इतना अभी बात किया कि what is the process approach to writing, what are the different approaches to writing, what do we mean by that? What do these approaches in writing mean? Now, writing also has multiple steps. There is a pre-writing phase, there is a writing phase, there is a post-writing phase. Okay? Pre-writing phase is, when you think about आपने किन चीजों के बारे में लिखना है, आपने सवाल को कैसे समझा है, ये चीज लिखने के लिए मुझे क्या-क्या materials चाहिए होंगे. तो writing कभी भी लिखने से शुरुआत नहीं होती है, right? Pre-writing phase is where you start thinking about what will you write, right? Then of course, writing, how do you develop the body of what you have to write? and then you revisit. And also note, you know, ये ऐसे नहीं है एक स्टेप है फिर दूसरा है फिर तीसरा है, इन स्टेप्स के बीच में हम बैक एंड फोर्थ मूव करते हैं. ओके, सो यू नो आप प्री राइटिंग में भी कई बार आपको थोड़े थोड़े नोट्स बनाने पड़ेंगे, आपको नोट मेकिंग करना पड़ेगा. सो प्री राइटिंग फेज will also involve some degree of writing, right? Pre-writing phase में you know you'll have to think of ideas, आप किस चीज पे फोकस करोगे, फोकस करके आप अपना मटेरियल कहाँ से कलेक्ट करोगे, what readings do you need to read, फिर स्ट्रक्चर और ब्लूप्रिंट क्या होगा राइटिंग का. यू मे ऑल्सो वांट टू कंसल्ट योर टीचर्स, योर पीयर ग्रुप्स, टेक सजेशंस फ्रॉम अदर्स as to how you would want to develop this writing, right? So blueprint can be something like this, or maybe this. Let me show it to you. Right? So jab bhi write, when you begin writing, you know there are certain concerns that you know when students write. कुछ कुछ चीजें हैं जो ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ ईयर देखने में आया है, मतलब खुद से भी स्ट्रगल किया है. यू नो एक टाइम था जब मुझे लगता था कि बस आप लिखना शुरू कर दो, मैं ब्लूप्रिंट नहीं बनाती थी, राइट? आपको लगता था कि 1500 शब्द लिखने हैं, 1500 वर्ड्स लिखने हैं, यू स्टार्ट राइटिंग एंड देन यू जस्ट सी कितने वर्ड्स हुए हैं. उसमें प्रॉब्लम क्या होता है, कई बार क्या है आप रियलाइज नहीं करोगे अगर आपने इस तरीके का स्ट्रक्चर नहीं बनाया है. पता लगा आप इंट्रोडक्शन ही 1000 वर्ड्स तक लिखते चले गए, फिर देन यू रियलाइज यू ऑलरेडी रिटन 1200 वर्ड्स, फिर जो मेन पार्ट था वो 200 वर्ड्स में लिख के खत्म कर दिया. तो आपको लगेगा आपने तो पूरे 1500 वर्ड्स लिखे थे, बट व्हाई हैव यू गॉट मार्क्ड सो लो? बिकॉज यू नॉट out of your 1500 words, majority of the part is not directed towards answering the question, right? So the first part of writing well is to understand what you're being asked to write. Have you been asked to explain? Have you been asked an application? Have you been asked to critically review? अगर आपको क्रिटिकली रिव्यू बोला है 1500 वर्ड्स में और 1200 वर्ड्स में आप उस थ्योरी को एक्सप्लेन ही किए जा रहे हो, और फिर लास्ट 2 लाइन लिखते हो, यू नो बट देयर आर लिमिटेशंस, फॉर एग्जांपल इट कांट बी यूज्ड इन दिस सेटिंग, हाउएवर इट वाज यूजफुल हियर, देन दैट मींस यू हैव नॉट आंसर्ड द क्वेश्चन. आपके पूरे स्ट्रक्चर में आंसर सिर्फ 2 लाइंस में है, राइट? सो एक्सट्रीमली इंपॉर्टेंट to first think about what has been asked. Okay, so if I've been, you know, just suggest a term paper title for me, मतलब something that आपके course से या जो आपको मिला हो recently. Any ideas for a topic or a question? Any idea? Just random, कोई ऐसे भी सोच सकते हैं अभी इस मोमेंट पे कुछ आ रहा हो.
Ma'am, learning English as a second language.
What?
Learning English as a second language.
Learning English as a second language. ठीक है, suppose आपको बोला है write a essay on learning English as a second language. Now you see, when you are asked to write a term paper, learning English as a second language, you have the opportunity to actually, you know, include all aspects of writing that we've discussed so far. You know, a little about theories, a little about reflection, a little about critique. तो पहला idea ये, what will I have to start doing is take a note. You know, take a page, take a Word document and start thinking about कि इसमें आप learning English as a second language में आप किन चीजों पे बात करना चाहोगे, right? अगर just a second, हाँ. So if I'm talking about an introduction, एक introduction होगा, एक main body होगा, एक conclusion होगा. अगर ये मेन आइडियाज हैं, इंट्रोडक्शन में इंग्लिश एज अ सेकेंड लैंग्वेज में what should my introduction be? Why English as a second language? कि English as a second language का मतलब क्या है? Right? So I would want to give some context. I may want to give the context that in India, English is an associate official language of the country. It is widely spoken. However, it is not the mother tongue or home language of most students. So while most are required to know it, it is a language that they learn usually after their mother tongue, right? That is why the second language. So I may want to first briefly discuss what do we mean by learning English as a second language, right? I may also want to differentiate it that, for like I've heard still many practitioners talk about English as a foreign language, right? For us Indians, English is not really a foreign language, right? So I may talk about learning English as a second language, may first giving a context of that India is a multicultural, multilinguistic country. There are, there are thousands of mother tongues. The last census that we had reported almost 1,600 languages as mother tongues. So mother tongues are obviously the languages that are learned first. But given that English enjoys a significance in our country, our higher education is largely in English. It's also the associate official language of the country. It becomes important to think about how children will learn English. And because it comes in second, it's English as a second language. So I may give a brief context, right? There is something that we call a hook sentence. Hook sentence is pehla sentence, which will get somebody interested in your work. Right? हम भी बहुत सारा चीजें देखते हैं, हमारा पढ़ने का मन नहीं करता क्योंकि पहले ही लाइन में लगता है it's going to be a trap, boring हो जाएगा. So think of an interesting first sentence, that is going to get reader interested in your work. Clearly communicate what it is going to be about. Or introduction mein sometimes you can also give an organization, a brief overview of how you will organize the answer. So I may say that, English is a associate official language of our country. It's widely spoken. However, it is not mother tongue or home language for a large part of the population. Hence, it comes in the school as a second language. The particular essay tries to look at, again, अब इसमें आपको focus ढूंढना पड़ेगा कि हम English as a second language पे क्या बात करना चाह रहे हैं. See, if I were to write an essay on English as a second language, my focus can be on why English should be a second language only, right? My one focus of writing can be discussing the status of English as a second language. So where I may say that, I don't think English should be the medium of instruction or the first language that the child is introduced to in school. That should be home language. But because English has a lot of significance, global, opportunities and all of that, so one focus can be कि I'm trying to justify English as second language, right? मेरा focus ये होगा या मेरा focus ये होगा on strategies कि मैं ये मान के चल रही हूँ कि English second language होगा most schools में, that English should be the second language, or that English is largely the second language. Then what are the strategies of learning English as a second language, right? I may want to, अगर मैंने इन दोनों में से focus कोई एक लिया है, it will be good to introduction में you should mention also what the focus of your answer would be, right? कि country में English का status क्या है, what do we mean by English as a second language, and what will be the focus of your paper? Will you debate this status, right? Will you question, critically examine this statement, or will you focus on strategies of this, or will you review, how it has been, कि किस तरीके से पढ़ाया गया है, क्या problems हैं इसको पढ़ाने में? Will you look at the challenges of teaching English as a second language? You may also want to focus on more than one, right? If a teacher has given you this question, it might make, it might be a good idea to even ask the teacher what do they think what would they want you to focus on, right? So it's also important to mention on the focus. I may mention the focus as that this essay focuses on debating, or this essay focuses on understanding why English needs to be learned as a second language, right? In which then my main body will be arguments in support of why mother tongue should be the first language, English should be the second language, and then of course how it can be taught, right? Or my answer may just straight away focus on strategies, or it may focus on both. I will first examine the status and then move towards strategies, right? So have a clear focus. Mention that focus in your introduction. अगर आप focus नहीं सोच पा रहे हैं, इसका मतलब अभी शुरू नहीं करना चाहिए. अगर आपको नहीं समझ में आ रहा है कि इसमें मेरे को किस चीज पे फोकस करना है, then it may help to talk to your teacher that what is it that they want you to focus on, right? So after your introduction, then comes the main body, right? A main body may I look at status of English as second language. I look at theories of teaching English as second language. I may want to do review of how English is taught as second language in India. There are a lot of people who've done ethnographic accounts of classrooms and how English is taught. Shalini Advani, Leah Matthews, a lot of people who are working on this. And then, some recommended strategies of how you want to use it. So think of what you, और इसमें फोकस क्या होगा कि बहुत सारे आइडियाज आपको इससे भी आ जाएंगे कि आपके कोर्स में क्या है, right? किन एस्पेक्ट्स पे फोकस किया है, or you want to then examine some strategies which are used, what are the strategies that are used, and then you want to look at which of these are useful, which are not useful, and then there will be a conclusion. So once I figure out कि पहले सोचना है कि मेरा फोकस क्या होगा, right? फोकस में एक ही चीज पे फोकस होगा या 2-3 चीज को मैं कवर करने की कोशिश करूंगी, right? फोकस के बाद फिर एक बार मैंने फोकस आइडेंटिफाई कर लिया तो मेन बॉडी में मुझे अगर वो फोकस है तो किन चीजों के बारे में बात करना पड़ेगा. Status of English as second language, history of it, or how is it in the policies. I'll have to think what is relevant. Again, आप कितने focus points decide करते हैं will also depend on the word limit that has been given to you, right? What have been the major thrust of what has been taught to you. So you can think of all of these. Once you've identified which of these you want to focus on, right? You will need to then identify कि आपको कौन-कौन से readings revisit करने हैं या कौन-कौन से readings ढूंढने पड़ेंगे. अगर if I'm looking at this English as a second language in India, then I would want to also mention the policies which talk about it as such, right? Then come to theories of how do you learn a second language, theories of second language acquisition. Then specifically coming to English, so whether it's a pedagogic paper, what paper, identifying academic sources from which you will be able to write all of these is important, right? उसके बाद ये भी आपका pre-writing phase है, but this will help you know how much you have written, right? Instead of seeing हमने 4 pages लिख लिए, 1000 शब्द लिख लिए, I use this blueprint to check how much I've written. So I know मेरा introduction हो गया है. I've covered 3 of the focus points from the 5 that I had. That gives me a better idea of how much I've completed. Right? That also helps me, keep to the word limit. If I know I have only 1500 words and these are the sections, I know how much words should I put for each of these topics, right? अब क्योंकि हर theme पे आप शायद 200 शब्द ही लिख पाएंगे, when you have to identify. So if I'm looking at theories of teaching of second language, will I focus on one theory? Or will I, then I can't keep just writing about theories. I'll have to summarize the theories in 200 words. That these are the theories of second language acquisition. This focuses on this, this focuses on this, this focuses on this. In India, we've largely seen a reliance on this theory. right? And of course, any claim that you make have to be backed by appropriate citations. But this structure is extremely important when you're going to, work more, right? So when we look at the pre-writing, isme aap, you have to think of all the ideas, identify the focus. जैसे English as a second language आया, ideas क्या निकले? Status of English as a second language. Are we talking about English as a second language in Indian context or the world context? I can talk about theories, I can talk about second language acquisition, I can focus on importance of English, I can focus on strategies, I can do a review of how it is done, whether it is done well or not. ये मैंने ideas generate किए. Now I'll see what my focus has to be. Like I said, a lot of your focus, if you're doing an independent writing for a journal, you can decide what you feel more trained to do. Otherwise, you can seek help of your teacher as to what they are looking at, or you can look at your course curriculum, the objectives of your course, and then see, what you will be expected to focus on. Then once you've identified the focus, a tentative blueprint aapka hai, then start identifying sources, right? Compiling relevant literature, making notes. और देखो ब्लूप्रिंट और ये वाला काम ना पैरेलली चलेगा. हो सकता है पहले मैंने सिर्फ किन्हीं दो ही चीजों पे फोकस किया था, बट एज आई रेड मोर आई थॉट कि अगर मैं स्ट्रैटेजीज लिख रही हूँ ना, मेरे को एग्जामिनिंग स्ट्रैटेजीज भी ऐड करना चाहिए एक पॉइंट. सो एज यू दिस विल गाइड व्हाट यू विल रीड, एंड एज यू रीड यू मे फाइंड ओके ये ना बहुत लंबा हो जाएगा या ये इतना रेलिवेंट नहीं है. We are talking about learning English as a second language in context of India. तो अभी इतना theories पे जाने की जरूरत नहीं है. Let's focus on these, right? Or you may want to add something more. I may have initially only written what do we mean by second language, but then I think after reading, I should, talk briefly about policy context of India. And if I'm writing it today, especially NEP 2020, what does it say about English as a second language? Right, so you will find कि आपका blueprint भी धीरे-धीरे revise होने लगेगा. And it's important to consistently be making notes when you're reading something, right? Make notes, know why you're reading what you're reading. In the next session tomorrow, I will also focus on how do you read to write. I mean, जब आप कुछ term paper लिखने के लिए चीजों को पढ़ रहे हैं, तो आप कैसे पढ़ेंगे, आप कैसे उसमें arguments identify करेंगे, right? But start making notes, identify relevant parts, right? And then, once you have a blueprint and you've done your note making, start writing. One, mistake that even I used to make a lot is मुझे लगता था, writing is also thinking. Okay? पहले मुझे एक टाइम पे ना मेरा राइटिंग बहुत डिलेड हो जाता था, क्योंकि मुझे लगता था जब तक मेरे दिमाग में पूरा ऐसे नहीं फॉर्म हो गया ना, मैं तभी लिख सकती हूँ जब पूरा आंसर मेरे दिमाग में आ गया है. ऐसे नहीं होता है. आप लिखना शुरू करोगे तो उस राइटिंग में भी आपके थॉट रिफाइंड होंगे, राइट? एंड फर्स्ट राइट डाउन एज इट इज कमिंग. आपका एक ब्लूप्रिंट है ही गाइड करने को, राइट? यू कैन कीप लुकिंग एट इट, बट स्टार्ट राइटिंग. And remember, your first writing is never your final writing. My first writing is always a flow of thoughts, right? अगर आप कभी मेरा first writing और मेरे final writing में difference देखोगे, first writing देख के तो आपको भी लग ही सकता है कि how come she is teaching, she has a PhD. Really? Because your first idea is, you're talking to yourself. आपने कुछ पढ़ा है, जैसे जैसे आइडियाज फॉर्म हो रहे हैं आप उनको लिखते जा रहे हो. जब एक बार वो लिख लोगे, whatever needed to come out has come out. Now I can go back and see इसको कैसे synthesize करना है, किस चीज को elaborate करना है, क्या चीज irrelevant है कि उसको हम हटा सकते हैं, right? That is how it will develop, right? So it's a back and forth process. As I'm writing something, I may find, okay, this point is coming out well. I think I need to substantiate this a little more. What is the literature I can read? Right? So these are parallel processes that happen, right? So you write your a major top. So, I mean, think about this blueprint and, this structure. How do we write the first? How do we write the second part, third part, fourth part? We'll focus on in tomorrow's session, along with how do we read for writing. But any questions today? I think we have 10 minutes left. So if there are any questions or anything that you feel, you would like to be addressed tomorrow that has not been taken up today, but you think would be useful for me to take up, any feedback, questions are welcome. Also, if अगर pacing ठीक है, आपको और examples चाहिए, so please feel free, क्योंकि online में कई बार eye contact नहीं हो पाता है, तो हो सकता है कि हम एक अपने train of thought में चले जाएं, और I'm not keeping pace with you. So please feel absolutely free to share.
Participants, please feel free to ask. So I think that she has explained everything in detail, because but लेकिन अगर कोई भी प्रश्न हो, दिमाग में कुछ भी उठ रहा हो, तो you can ask her.
Right. Or, क्योंकि actually, to be honest, even to think of thinking about writing came because we all have struggled with writing, right? बहुत बार होता है, it's only, peer responses. कई बार when I write what I write, I have realized over a period of years that, I've had to train myself to learn to edit my work. क्योंकि शुरू में ना मैं वो पढ़ती थी जो मुझे लगता है मैंने लिखा है, ना कि जो मैंने लिखा है. तो अगर कुछ गलती भी की हो ना, कई बार वो खुद को नहीं दिखता है. तो अब या तो मैं कई बार अपने colleagues को it helps to be open to feedback. So sometimes I show it to my colleagues, my friends, or sometimes immediately after writing I take a little break, ताकि वो ट्रेन छूट में एक पॉज लग जाए. अदरवाइज अगर मैंने गलत लिखा है ना, मैं वही पढ़ती हूँ जो मुझे लगता है मैंने लिखा था. Another thing that I've learned after making a lot of mistakes is, when you're writing the first time, because you're also thinking, my first draft sometimes has very long complicated sentences, क्योंकि वैसे thought बन रहा है. So, one of my initial writings would look like, so there is this, however, if we look into this, this can happen, though if there is this, there could be this, while it goes on and on. तो because it's एक idea दिमाग में बन रहा है, वो उस तरीके से आता है. लॉन्ग सेंटेंसेस में मिस्टेक्स भी होते हैं, कई बार एक वर्ड छूट जाए, एक कॉमा इधर उधर हो जाए, पूरा मीनिंग अलग हो जाता है. Right? So one response that I used to get from my supervisor while writing my PhD dissertation very often was कि it's fine अगर तुमने पहले ड्राफ्ट में लंबा सेंटेंस लिखा है क्योंकि तुम सोच रहे थे, लेकिन दोबारा पढ़ने पे उसको छोटा छोटा कर दो, नहीं तो जो पढ़ रहा है वो तो आपके मेरे दिमाग में नहीं घुस के देख पा रहा है वो कैसे था. You'll make lesser mistakes if you use simpler words and you write shorter sentences.
मुझे लगता है हम आज यहीं पे खत्म करते हैं. You must be, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, ma'am. First of all, I would like to congratulate you for this wonderful session. It is going to help us write examination, assignments. Just wanted to know a bit more about. You talked about the website and digital content. We are living in the era of digital content.
Okay.
So, हम कैसे इस चीज को समझें कि हम वेबसाइट पर जा रहे हैं, we are googling something and it comes up with plenty of websites और बहुत सारे information हमको online उपलब्ध होते हैं. तो कुछ इसके बारे में कुछ मैं चाहूंगा कि आप ज्यादा आइडियाज अगर आप शेयर करें कि हम कैसे वेबसाइट्स को समझें कि यहाँ पर हमारा कंटेंट ऑथेंटिक है. क्योंकि आप आपने व्हाट्सएप यूनिवर्सिटी की बात की जो कि हम 90% कंटेंट हमारे फेक होते हैं एंड जस्ट आई मीन इट्स प्री प्लान्ड एंड वो सर्कुलेट होते रहते हैं.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल. नहीं, आपका सवाल एक्चुअली बहुत बहुत यूजफुल है एंड आई एम सो ग्लैड यू आस्क्ड. See, if I can, briefly share some of the pointers that I keep in mind. ये exhaustive नहीं है, इसमें और भी add हो सकते हैं. But how do I identify academic resources on the internet? ये कैसे मुझे पता है ये एक verified credible academic source है? अकेडमिक को मैं क्रेडिबल के साथ इसलिए जोड़ रही हूँ बिकॉज आई प्रिज्यूम वो अकेडमिक है, इसका मतलब वो रिसर्च एविडेंस बेस्ड ही होगा, राइट? फर्स्ट थिंग इज that you can keep in mind. I hope the screen is visible on which I'm writing, right?
Yes.
What web page, what website it is, okay? So if I'm for instance, let me also open a random page. Yeah. So suppose ये मैंने Google search किया and I want to look at symptoms of dengue. ठीक है? Now the first thing is इसमें बहुत सारे वो आ रहे हैं. अगर मैंने I'll first see किसका website है. ठीक है? Again, while I'm giving this example, I think it is absolutely important to reiterate that do not self-diagnose and self-medicate. This is just कि जब initially कुछ होता है हम usually check करते हैं कि क्या हो सकता है और उसके बाद आप डॉक्टर के पास जाते हैं, right? So first I will look at ये किसका वेबसाइट है, right? ये एक क्लिनिक का वेबसाइट है. इसमें कॉन्टैक्ट डिटेल्स हैं, अपॉइंटमेंट हैं. इसका मतलब इट्स लाइकली टू बी रिलायबल बिकॉज आई हैव अ वे ऑफ फाइंडिंग आउट मोर, राइट? बहुत सारे साइट्स कई बार ऐसे होंगे जिसमें ये सब हेल्पलाइन आप देख रहे हैं, मेडिकल वेब, इन सब के वेबसाइट्स हैं. सो वन इज कि किसका वेबसाइट है बिकम्स इम्पोर्टेंट. विकिपीडिया आई विल अवॉइड बिकॉज इसमें कोई भी चेंज कर सकता है. इट मे नॉट बी अप्रोप्रिएट मेडिकल इंफॉर्मेशन. I may want to maybe see a reference from what is given below. But अगर so my first indicator actually इसकी वेबसाइट किसका है. अगर किसी ऐसे ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का है या इंस्टीट्यूट का है जो उस एरिया में काम करता है, then that is one thing that it can be used, right? Again, there is a difference slight difference even between academic and credible resources. A resource can be credible without necessarily being kind of an academic writing, right? ये हो गया कि वेबसाइट है या नहीं है. सेकंड, अगर मैं एकेडमिक पेपर्स की ही बात कर रही हूँ तो वेबसाइट लार्जली होगी किसी जर्नल का वेबसाइट, राइट? Second is again, who is the author? Is it just, is it somebody who is known is author name even given? बहुत सारे pages ऐसे होते हैं जिसमें कोई author name नहीं है. So how do I know whether I trust this person or not? And I'm not talking about personal trust. Suppose there is an author name given. At least it allows me to go on the internet and search whether this author is an expert in the field or a student. In West, there is a lot of trend of students posting their assignments on the website. So, जहाँ पे author name लिखा होगा, लेकिन वो academic source या बहुत credible source नहीं है क्योंकि वो किसी student का ही assignment है. when I do the name search, it might show me that it's just a student, a first year student in some foreign university, right? So who's the author? And then what are the credentials of the author? Right? Is the author an expert in that field? I'm more likely to listen to Harsha Bhogle on cricket and Shah Rukh Khan on acting, or Nasiruddin Shah on acting, than vice versa, right? So what are the credentials of the author in that domain, right? Krishna Kumar speaking on education will, for me, would be more credible than Amitabh Bachchan speaking on education, right? So it's not just that the author is known. What is the expertise of the author in that domain? And if it is not an author, कई चीजें organizational writing में होती हैं. आपको यूनिसेफ के डॉक्यूमेंट्स जैसे हैं, अगर आप चाइल्ड राइट्स पे कुछ पढ़ रहे हैं, आपको यूएन के डॉक्यूमेंट्स मिलेंगे जिसमें ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ने ऑथर किया है, right? So what is the credibility of that organization to write on this issue, right? So for instance, there is an organization called Tarshi that writes on sexual education for children. Now, if I know if Tarshi has written something on how to talk to children about their bodies, about consent, I'm more likely to believe it than some anonymous page. Right? Second, basis of writing. Is it clear or not? Right? Is it clear? By basis of writing, I mean, या तो उन्होंने जर्नल्स को, एकेडमिक पेपर्स को साइट किया होना चाहिए, उसमें रेफरेंसेस होने चाहिए कि इफ आई एम सेइंग कि ये सिम्टम्स हैं डेंगू के, वो कहाँ से मैंने निकाले हैं? हैव आई गिवन अ रेफरेंस ऑफ अ मेडिकल जर्नल बुकलेट that says those are the symptoms of dengue? If I'm talking about language, I'm talking about language strategies. So if somebody has written, author नाम भी है, उन्होंने कहा है this is the best, RRR approach is the best way to teach language, you read, you write, you repeat. Where have they drawn this from? Have they referred to some theory? If yes, which theory it is? Whose theory is it? Is the reference there? अगर मैं देखना चाहूँ कि ये theory useful है या नहीं, if I'm an honest academic writer, I will be absolutely transparent about the basis of what I'm writing. If I'm saying I'm making this argument based on Freud's work, I will give reference of Freud's work so that you can go to Freud's work and see whether it is making sense to you or not. Right? Theory है, research के basis पे भी है, मतलब किसी और का research cite किया है तो उसका reference दिया है या नहीं? Do they have that transparency कि आप भी इन works को जाके refer करके देख सकते हो? See, कई बार ये भी हो सकता है. I always tell my students, read the originals, right? When I talk about Freud or I talk about Paulo Freire or I talk about John Dewey, at some level, it is still my understanding of them. It can happen, that if you read the original, you may reach far better insights than what I was able to reach. As much as I'm trying to stay close to the text, I'm still human and it's my interpretation. अगर कोई चीज मुझे समझ में नहीं आई है, मैं आपको कैसे बताऊंगी? And your understanding of that author should not get limited simply because I didn't understand it, right? So I should say, I'm teaching from this book, go read that book also. So if there is something I have missed or maybe incorrectly captured, you are able to capture it right? So there are citations, references. If it is based on own research, then the methodology should be clearly outlined. Methodology में sample क्या था, tools क्या थे. A lot of times when you see advertisements, they'll say, हमने 100 लोगों से पूछा. अब इंडिया के पॉपुलेशन में पहले 100 लोगों से पूछना is no sample, right? आपने 100 किन लोगों से पूछा? If I say I'm a very good teacher, I asked 50 students and they all said I'm a great teacher. Which 50 students? Were they my ex students जिनका grading अब मेरे हाथ में नहीं है तो वो honestly बोल सकते हैं, or is it 50 students जिनका final assessment का grading अभी मेरे हाथ में है? Right? So am I clear about which sample am I talking about? A lot of advertisements will say 99% people agree. 99% out, 99% can be what? 9.9 out of 10. It can also, I may have just used a sample of 10. 80% feel. 50% agree with me. मैंने सिर्फ 2 लोगों को पूछा, एक ने agree किया, एक ने disagree किया. तो right, I'll say, you think I'm wrong, but 50% or 60% people still agree with me. तो मैंने पूछा ही 3 लोगों से है. तो सैंपल का स्ट्रेंथ क्या था, कहां से सैंपल लिया, is it just the people I know, or is it representative of the population about which I'm making generalizations? So all of this, website क्या है, author क्या है, basis of writing clear है या नहीं, कौन से date को post हुआ था, so is it time, is it relevant, informations also, knowledge advances, when was it posted, right? Are there any contact details shared? So these are some of, is it possible for me to verify, is the source given, who is it who's giving it, when was it posted? Nowadays we find a lot of fake news which involves videos of years back suddenly being circulated ki aaj ye hua hai. So is the date of when the post was made, when was it modified, clear? Right? So all of these, if you're looking academically, looking at JSTOR, Google maybe, it helps to go to Google Scholar. Right? Go type Google Scholar, go here. यहाँ पे अगर आप कुछ keywords type करोगे, जैसे roles of questions, you'll find that most of the articles that appear here are from journals, are from academic journals. Right? And of course, your universities will have e-libraries जिसमें आपका journals का access होगा. So largely look at research and theoretical papers. जो इंटरनेट पे आता है वो उससे, मैं ये नहीं बोल रही हूँ आप वो मत देखिए, वो आपको एक फेमिलियरिटी दे देगा, लेकिन वो उसको क्रेडिबल नॉलेज मत समझिए जब तक आपने उसको क्रॉस चेक ना किया हो. These are some of the criterias. Again, कौन से जर्नल में है, जैसे मैंने कहा, if it's published in journal, but आजकल इतने सारे predatory journals भी हैं जिसमें आप पैसे दे के छपवा सकते हो, right? So what journal is it? Is it a peer-reviewed journal? Right? Is it a journal that has a strict criteria for selection of papers? That is why, nowadays you also have different lists of journals, whether it's an index journal, uska impact factor kya hai, but largely minimum hai ki wo peer reviewed hai ya nahi. Right? So which journal are you looking at? So which textbook are you looking at? If it's a book, I will look at who's the author, who's the printer, ये कहाँ से आई है. So if it's a book on political ideology, I would also want to see who's published it. Then I can know, whether it's going to be one-sided view, both-sided view. Even it helps me to know, okay, मुझे पता तो है ना ये यहाँ से आ रहा है. So I'll treat it like that, right? So I hope, Ajit, that answers to some extent, and I'm sure there are people who can add more to it. This is just a very brief outline of perhaps, some things that you can keep in mind while looking at internet for more credible resources.
Thank you very much, Shivani. And तो हम लोग कल फिर से मिलते हैं.
बिल्कुल.
Okay.
I look forward to it. And what I'm just doing is मैं ना अपना email ID chat box में डाल रही हूँ. अगर कल सुबह या दोपहर तक आपको लगता है कुछ सवाल है या कोई चीज है जिस पे फोकस करने से आपको मदद मिलेगी, तो मेरी पूरी कोशिश रहेगी. ऑफ कोर्स आई विल आल्सो हैव टू सी वेदर आई एम मतलब is it something that I know that I can tell you about, but if I do know and you need it, then then I can make it more attuned to what your need might be. So yeah, look forward to meeting you all tomorrow now.
Amen.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Bye bye.